Between 1970 and 1985, the average number of homemade dishes on a Black holiday table dropped from 28 to 14, according to USDA household food consumption surveys conducted across rural and urban kitchens. That is half a holiday table, gone in 15 years. Number 19 on this list took 2 days to prepare and vanished when frozen pies arrived. Number 12 once fed 40 cousins from a single iron pot at every reunion in Georgia. Number 3 was so common in low-country homes that the cook measured rice by the bushel, not the cup. These 25 dishes were not fancy. They were the proof a holiday had been honored. Hit subscribe before this list ends, and stay with us as we walk through the Christmas, New Year, Easter, and Juneteenth tables that disappeared. Number 25. Number 25, fresh-killed Christmas hen with sage gravy. The bird came from the yard back then, not the freezer. A grandmother in Edna Lewis's Freetown, Virginia would walk out at dawn on Christmas Eve, pick the hen herself, and have it plucked, drawn, and rubbed with sage and lard before the children were awake. The cavity was packed with stale cornbread, onion, and a single egg. The drippings became a gravy you ladled over white rice, and your aunt would tell you the flavor was something you would chase your whole life and never find again. Picture a kitchen with the wood stove going since 5 in the morning. Imagine the smell. By 1978, the Yardbirds were gone. The supermarket sold a butterball in plastic, and the sage gravy lost its center. The hen was not just dinner, it was the year saying thank you. Number 24, pig's feet salad with pickled onion. This was the cold dish that sat on the buffet between Thanksgiving and New Year in a heavy crockery bowl passed down from your grandmother. The feet were boiled until the meat slid off the bone, then chopped fine with celery, sweet pickle, and red onion soaked in vinegar. A spoon of mustard, a pinch of black pepper. You ate it on a saltine, and the cold gel of the broth held the whole thing together like memory. The flavor was the cold side of the holiday. By the early 1980s, pig's feet had been pulled from most northern grocery cases. Nobody under 30 knew how to clean them anymore. The salad disappeared one cousin at a time. The dish was quiet pride. Number 23, home-canned ambrosia with hand-grated coconut. This was not the Cool Whip and Mandarin orange version that came later. The ambrosia of 1962 began in summer when a black household in Birmingham would put up oranges and pineapple from a roadside stand, sealing them in glass jars in the cellar. On Christmas Day, your mother opened a jar, drained the syrup into a saucepan to thicken, and grated a fresh coconut by hand on the side of a tin grater. The shavings curled into the bowl like white ribbons. A spoonful tasted like July sunshine in the middle of December. That was the whole point. By 1976, the canning equipment was pushed to the back of the pantry. Frozen fruit cocktail had taken its place. The coconut came pre-shredded in a bag, and nobody noticed how easy and how flat the bowl had become. The flavor of summer was gone. Number 22, sweet potato pone baked in a cast iron skillet. Pone is what came before the pie. The grandmother of a Greenville, Mississippi household would grate raw sweet potatoes into a bowl with molasses, butter, an egg, a fistful of brown sugar, and grated nutmeg. The whole thing went into a hot iron skillet and baked until the edges turned dark and chewy, and the middle stayed soft like a soft pudding with a candy crust. You ate it warm with a glass of cold milk on Christmas afternoon, sitting on the porch in your church clothes. The day was quiet, the dish was loud. By 1979, the pone had been replaced by a smoother pie and a store-bought crust. Easier, prettier, not the same. The pone was rough, alive, and tasted like the dirt the potato came from. Number 21, chitterlings, simmered overnight with red pepper. This was the Christmas Eve dish in working-class black households from Detroit to New Orleans. The intestines came in a 5-gallon bucket from the butcher, and the grandmothers of the family spent a full afternoon cleaning them under cold running water in the backyard. The pot simmered all night with onion, garlic, vinegar, and crushed red pepper, and the smell sat in the curtains for a week. You ate them on Christmas Day with hot sauce and a slice of white bread. The flavor was hard, earthy, and absolutely a holiday food. Booker T. Washington wrote about this very tradition at Christmas more than a century ago. By the late 1970s, the cleaning ritual was vanishing. Younger cousins refused the chore. Grocery chains stopped stocking the hog tubs. Within one generation, the dish moved from a centerpiece to a memory. Number 20, mincemeat pie made with venison and apple. Most people now believe mincemeat is British and contains no meat. The Black Southern version proves both ideas wrong. A cook in rural Alabama would simmer ground venison or beef neck with chopped apple, raisins, sweet brown sugar, cinnamon, allspice, and a splash of cider until the whole thing became dark and thick like the inside of a fruitcake. It went into a deep dish, pie crust, and baked until the kitchen smelled like a tavern in October. You ate it warm with a hard sauce of butter, sugar, and bourbon. The slice was rich enough that one was enough. By 1974, supermarket mincemeat in a jar had replaced the homemade version, and the meat was gone. Today, most people have never tasted the real thing. The pie was strange and absolutely the food of a celebration. Number 19, persimmon pudding with ribbon cane syrup. This was the dessert that took 2 days. From the Christmas table, we now move into the small dishes the grandmothers of the house made by hand, the kind every child crowded the kitchen for. A woman in Marengo County, Alabama, would gather wild persimmons after the first frost, push them through a sieve to remove the seeds, and let the orange pulp sit overnight. The next morning, she stirred it with cornmeal, eggs, ribbon cane syrup poured from a tin can with a wooden plug, and a generous spoon of butter. The pudding baked low and slow until the top set into a dark, almost burnt sugar crust. You ate it warm with a spoon of fresh cream. The flavor was tart, sweet, and grown up in a way that no box pudding has ever been. Imagine the smell of a frost-ripened persimmon, almost like apricot, but heavier. Year after year, that smell meant Christmas was here. By 1976, ribbon cane syrup was disappearing from country store shelves. The small Louisiana mills that pressed it had been bought out by the corn syrup industry. Persimmon trees were being cut down for housing. The pudding required 2 days no working mother had to spare. Within a decade, a dessert that had marked Christmas in black households for a century was reduced to a story you told at the table. The grandmother used to make it without a recipe, by feel. Number 18, divinity candy in 3 colors. Divinity is a meringue made with hot sugar syrup, beaten by hand until the candy turns soft and white and holds a peak. A woman in Birmingham would make 3 batches, tinting one pink with strawberry, one pale green with mint, and leaving one white and studded with toasted pecans. The pieces were dropped by the spoonful onto wax paper and left on the counter to set like little snowdrifts the size of a quarter. You were allowed 1 piece on Christmas Eve and 1 on Christmas morning. That was the whole rule. By the early 1980s, store-bought candy filled the holiday bowls. The hand mixer that divinity required sat unused. The candy demanded dry weather and a steady hand, and the women who knew the trick of it were no longer teaching it. What most people miss is how much the weather mattered. A humid kitchen would ruin the batch. Number 17, Lane cake with raisin and bourbon filling. The Lane cake was the most ambitious Black holiday dessert in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. The cake itself was 4 thin layers of white butter cake, but the filling was the heart of it. A grandmother in Selma would simmer raisins, chopped pecans, and shredded coconut with butter, sugar, egg yolks, and a generous half cup of bourbon until the mixture turned thick, dark, and fragrant like a warm fruit cake melting into a custard. The filling went between every layer and on top. The frosting was a fluffy white 7-minute boiled icing. The cake had to sit 2 days before you cut it, sometimes 3, so the bourbon and the coconut could marry into the crumb. You did not eat Lane cake casually. You ate it on Christmas. You ate it on Easter. You ate it on a wedding day, on the Sunday after a funeral. It was the cake your mother carried into the church basement on a glass pedestal, walking slowly because the layers were soft and the filling was heavy. By 1977, the Lane cake was already fading from holiday tables in Black households. It demanded a working knowledge of 7-minute frosting, 12 eggs cracked by hand, 2 days of waiting room, and a clean bottle of bourbon. Working mothers entering the labor force in record numbers did not have the time. Bakery cakes replaced it, and the Lane cake survived only in Harper Lee's novel and in a few Alabama kitchens where one grandmother insisted. The cake was not just dessert, it was a statement that this household honored its holidays with 2 days of work, 12 eggs, and a willingness to wait. The cake said, "This is what we do for the people we love." Number 16, Hopping John from a 50-pound rice sack. From the Christmas table, we now move to the New Year's table, where the food was less about celebration and more about insurance for the year ahead. The traditional New Year's dish in Black households across the South was a one-pot meal of black-eyed peas, long-grain Carolina rice, and a smoked ham hock, simmered together until the rice absorbed every drop of pork fat. The rice came from a 50-pound burlap sack stored under the kitchen counter, scooped out by the cup with an old coffee tin. The peas had been soaked overnight in a big enamel bowl. The dish came from the Gullah people, passed down for generations. The peas symbolized coins, the greens beside them, paper money. By 1980, Black households were buying rice in 2-pound bags, and the 50-pound sack vanished. The dish kept its name. The bones of it changed. The luck stayed. Number 15, ham hock collards on New Year's Day. Collard greens on New Year's symbolized money, and the ham hock symbolized the pig that had been slaughtered in November. A grandmother in coastal South Carolina would simmer the hock for 2 hours alone before adding the greens, allowing the broth to turn thick and golden with rendered fat like a brown silk underneath the leaf. The greens went in by the pound, washed leaf by leaf, a splash of vinegar at the end, a pinch of red pepper. You drank the Potlikker straight from the bowl with cornbread to soak the rest. The bowl warmed your hands before it warmed your mouth. By 1982, most Black households were buying frozen chopped collards in a plastic bag. The ham hock had become a smoked turkey wing. The Potlikker lost its depth. The greens lost their shine. Number 14, neck bone gravy over white rice. The pork neck bones simmered for 2 hours with onion and garlic until the meat fell off the bone and the broth turned to dark and thick. The grandmother of the house would pull every shred of meat off by hand, return it to the pot, and let the gravy reduce until it coated the back of a spoon like brown silk poured slow. You ladled it over a mound of white rice and ate it with a fork that was almost too small for the work. The rice took the gravy in like a sponge. The flavor was thick. It was savory. It was the cheapest cut of pork doing the most beautiful work. By 1979, the neck bones were getting hard to find. The dish quietly slipped off the table. One year, it was there. The next year, it was not. Number 13, black-eyed pea cakes fried in lard. After the New Year's pot of peas had been eaten, the leftover peas were mashed with a fork, mixed with the beaten egg and a spoon of cornmeal, shaped into small patties, and fried in a heavy iron pan with a tablespoon of lard. The cakes turned dark brown and crisp on the outside, soft and herby on the inside like a bean falafel before anybody knew that word. You ate them for breakfast on January 2nd with a fried egg and a side of pepper sauce. The first bite was hot, the second bite was perfect. By 1981, lard was disappearing from black kitchens. The leftover peas were thrown away or fed to the dog. The cakes vanished. Your grandmother used to call this the second life of the dish, the part of the holiday where nothing was wasted. Number 12, souse meat from the holiday, hog. Souse was the cold meat dish made from the leftover trimmings of the hog that had been slaughtered for the holiday season. A black household in eastern North Carolina would simmer the head, the feet, the tongue, and the ears with vinegar, sage, and red pepper for half a day, then pull every shred of meat from the bone by hand, pack it into a deep crockery bowl, pour the cooking liquid over the top, and let the whole thing set overnight. By morning, the broth had turned to a firm, savory jelly that held the meat together like a sliceable loaf. You sliced it thin, you ate it cold. The dish stretched a single hog into a holiday week of breakfast. By 1977, the home hog kill was gone in most black households. Souse vanished with it. The dish was waste not cooking at its highest, and the entire skill set retired with the grandmothers who had practiced it. Number 11, rice and gravy with giblets. From the New Year's table, we now move into the breakfast that came the day after every holiday. The giblets, which are the heart, gizzard, and liver of the holiday bird, simmered slowly with onion, celery, and the carcass of yesterday's hen until the broth turned thick and brown like a deep October leaf. A grandmother in New Orleans would add a quarter cup of flour cooked in butter to thicken it further into a true gravy, and then ladle the whole thing over a mound of white rice on a chipped breakfast plate. The giblets, chopped fine, gave the gravy its iron dark color and its almost organ meat richness, the kind of flavor no gravy made from a packet has ever come close to matching. You ate it with the front page of the newspaper folded next to your plate, the radio on low, and the smell of yesterday's hen still in the curtains. The dish was the proof that nothing had been wasted, that the holiday was being honored not just by what was set on the table the night before, but by what was eaten the morning after, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. By 1980, the practice of saving the giblets had nearly vanished from urban black households. Supermarket birds came with the giblets in a small paper packet inside the cavity, and most cooks pulled the packet out and threw it into the trash. The carcass went into the bin too. The breakfast disappeared. The dish was not just food, it was a philosophy of gratitude and stewardship, of refusing to let the bird that gave its life for your holiday meal go to waste. The part that surprised me when I went looking for the recipe is how few cookbooks wrote it down. The dish lived in the hands. When it left the breakfast table, it took something with it no nutritionist has measured. Number 10, coconut layer cake with 7-minute frosting. The coconut cake was the showpiece dessert in black households across Charleston, Savannah, and the Low Country coast. 3 layers of soft white cake soaked with a thin coconut milk syrup and frosted in a fluffy white 7-minute icing beaten over a double boiler until it stood up in stiff peaks like little white waves. The whole cake was rolled in fresh shaved coconut, the shreds catching the light like a small snowfall. You served it on a clear glass cake stand with a cake knife, your grandmother had received as a wedding gift in 1948. The slice was light, the flavor was deep. By 1978, the 7-minute frosting was disappearing from home kitchens. It demanded a candy thermometer and 20 straight minutes of beating over hot water. Bakery cakes replaced it. The coconut shavings came from a plastic bag, and the cake lost its hand. Number 9, Easter ham with sorghum molasses glaze. From the New Year's table, we now move into the spring tables of Easter and Juneteenth, when Black households shifted into something brighter. A bone-in country ham was scored across the top in a diamond pattern, studded with whole cloves at every intersection, and brushed with a thick glaze of sorghum molasses, brown sugar, and a tablespoon of dry mustard. A cook in Tennessee would baste the ham every 20 minutes for 3 hours until the glaze caramelized into a dark, almost black crust that crackled under the knife like a sugar pane on a creme brulee. The slice was salty, sweet, and smoky in equal parts. By 1979, sorghum molasses had vanished from most southern grocery shelves. Honey and brown sugar took its place. The flavor lost its slightly bitter depth. The ham got sweeter and shallower and less itself. Number 8, sage and cornbread, dressing with chicken stock. The Black Southern version of holiday dressing was always cornbread, never bread cubes, and never inside the bird. A grandmother in Memphis would bake a fresh skillet of unsweetened cornbread on Easter morning, crumble it cold into a deep bowl, and mix it with sautéed onion, celery, green pepper, a bunch of fresh sage, 2 beaten eggs, and enough chicken stock to make the whole thing wet but not soupy, like a soft pudding before it sets. It baked in a separate pan beside the ham, the top turning golden and cracked. The smell of fresh sage filled the kitchen. The flavor of the dressing was earthy. By 1981, the canned cream of chicken soup had crept into the recipe in many homes. The fresh sage was replaced with a teaspoon of dried. The dressing got smoother and lost its grit. The holy trinity of green pepper, onion, and celery survived. The sage mostly did not. Number 7, deviled crab in shells from Sapelo Island. On the Gullah Geechee coast of Georgia, the Easter table included a small course of deviled crab, baked and served in the actual crab shell. A woman on Sapelo Island would pick fresh blue crab meat by hand, mix it with sautéed onion, green pepper, mustard, mayonnaise, a spoon of Worcestershire, a pinch of cayenne, and a handful of crushed saltine. The mixture was packed back into the empty shells, dotted with butter, and baked until the tops turned golden and crisp like little brown crowns. You ate them with your fingers off the shell. The bite was sweet, sharp, and absolutely a coastal dish. Sally Ann Robinson, a 6th-generation Gullah cook, has written about this very preparation. By the late 1970s, the Gullah communities were losing their younger members to mainland cities. The shells were not being saved anymore. The dish moved from a regular Easter course to a museum piece. Number 6, buttermilk pound cake from a wood stove. The pound cake was the dessert that traveled. A woman in rural Mississippi would beat a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, 6 eggs, and a cup of buttermilk by hand for 30 straight minutes until the batter turned pale and almost glossy, like a thick cream you could ribbon off the spoon. The cake baked in a heavy tube pan in the bottom of a wood stove for an hour and a half. The crust was thin and golden. The crumb was tender and tight. You wrapped it in a clean kitchen towel and carried it to Easter dinner at the cousin's house. The cake arrived warm. The cake left empty. By 1980, most Black households had electric ovens. The wood stove cake was gone, and a smoky undertone went with it. A box mix took its place, and nobody cried. Number 5, sweet potato biscuit with peach preserves. The sweet potato biscuit was a Sunday holiday breakfast staple in Black households from Virginia to Louisiana. Cold mashed sweet potato was beaten into self-rising flour with a generous spoon of lard and a splash of buttermilk, then rolled out, cut into rounds, and baked until the tops were golden. You split each biscuit warm and spread it with home canned peach preserves your grandmother had put up the previous August. The orange of the biscuit and the gold of the preserves, stacked together like a sunset on a small plate. The first bite was warm. The second bite was the whole holiday. By 1980, biscuits came from a refrigerated tube and the preserves came from a glass jar with a supermarket label. The flavor lost its summer. The Sunday lost a small ritual. Number 4, Brunswick stew at the family reunion. The Brunswick stew was the centerpiece of the Black family reunion in Georgia and Virginia, cooked outdoors in a black iron washpot over a wood fire. A grandfather in Brunswick County would stand over the pot for 6 hours, stirring with a wooden paddle the size of a canoe oar. The stew contained chicken, pork, butter beans, corn cut from the cob, tomato, onion, and a sharp shot of vinegar at the end. The whole pot fed 40 cousins from a single ladle. You ate it from a paper bowl on a folding table under a pecan tree with white bread to sop the bottom. The smell carried for half a mile. The tradition goes back to a hunting camp cook named Jimmy Matthews in 1828, passed down through generations of Black Southern reunions. By 1985, the washpot tradition was vanishing. The stew came from a slow cooker. The reunion was indoors. The dish lost its crowd and its smoke. Number 3, Big Red soda with smoked goat for Juneteenth. In Texas, Black households, the Juneteenth table was anchored by smoked goat and a tall glass bottle of Big Red soda, that bright cherry red drink bottled in Waco since 1937. A grandfather in Houston would dig a pit at dawn, smoke the goat over pecan wood for 8 hours, and serve it pulled from the bone on a paper plate with white bread and a wedge of red watermelon. The Big Red came in glass bottles from a corner store, frosted from the cooler. The red of the soda, the red of the watermelon, and the red of the barbecue sauce all carried the same weight, drawn from West African traditions of red as the color of remembrance. The flavor was sweet. The meaning was heavy. By the early 1980s, plastic 2-liter bottles had replaced the glass. The smoked goat was getting hard to find outside Texas. The Juneteenth table started shrinking, even as the holiday itself was being recognized in more places. Number 2, Sunday peach cobbler with hand-crimped crust. The peach cobbler was the Sunday holiday dessert in Black households from Atlanta to Oakland. Fresh ripe peaches were peeled and sliced into a deep buttered pan, sprinkled with sugar, cinnamon, and a tablespoon of flour, dotted with butter, and topped with a soft biscuit dough crust crimped by hand around the rim. A woman in Macon would make the crimping pattern with her thumb and forefinger, working her way around the pan in a steady rhythm, the way a piano player works a scale. The cobbler baked until the peach juice bubbled up through the slits in the top crust. You ate it warm with a scoop of homemade vanilla ice cream churned by hand on the back porch. The cobbler was the sound of a porch in July. By 1982, the cobbler still appeared on Black holiday tables, but the peaches came from a can, the crust from a frozen pie shell, and the ice cream from the supermarket freezer. The cobbler was still good. It was just no longer a small ritual. Number 1, hot water cornbread with potlikker. This was the simplest dish on every Black holiday table and the first one to vanish. A grandmother in any Black household from Memphis to Harlem would pour boiling water over white cornmeal, salt, and a spoon of bacon grease, stir it into a thick paste, shape it into small, flat cakes the size of her palm, and fry them in a hot skillet until the edges turned dark and crisp. You ate the cornbread soaked in the pot liquor from the collards, the broth that had simmered all day with the ham hock, the salt of the broth, the sweet of the corn, the soft and the crisp at once. The bowl was hot, the bread was crackling, the flavor was the whole afternoon in a bite. By 1983, hot water cornbread had nearly disappeared from urban black holiday tables. The pot liquor was poured down the drain. A Jiffy box took its place. The dish required no recipe, no measuring, and 12 minutes. It vanished anyway because nobody had 12 minutes anymore.
Sweet pea and potato casserole was one of those gentle, unassuming dishes that fed families through tight budgets and busy lives. It came together from pantry staples: canned peas, diced potatoes, a bit of cream or broth, and whatever seasoning happened to be nearby. Once baked, it softened into a creamy, comforting dish that tasted like warmth itself. It was not bold, not spicy, not dramatic, but it did not need to be. It was the kind of food that sat quietly on the table, filling plates and stomachs without fanfare. Kids often pushed peas around their plates only to realize, bite by bite, that the casserole actually tasted pretty good. Adults appreciated that it stretched ingredients far enough to feed everyone while still feeling whole. It tasted like a memory of soft kitchen light and evenings that moved slowly. Even now, there is something deeply soothing about the simplicity of peas and potatoes baked together, reminding people that comfort does not need to be complicated. Cranberry sauce made from whole berries and sugar water provided the traditional tart-sweet condiment without spending money on canned versions that cost 3 times more. Black mothers would buy fresh cranberries when they appeared seasonally in grocery stores, usually paying less than $1 for a pound that made enough sauce for 20 people. The berries were simmered with sugar and water until they burst and thickened into glossy, ruby-red sauce that tasted fresher and brighter than anything from cans. Some women added orange zest when citrus was affordable, while others kept it simple with just berries, sugar, and patience. The sauce could be made days ahead and actually improved with time as flavors melded, making it perfect for busy Thanksgiving preparations. Children loved the sweet tart flavor that contrasted with rich, savory dishes, while adults appreciated the burst of color and acidity that balanced heavy meals.
Number 21, fried chicken. Every woman had her own fried chicken, and no 2 batches tasted alike. A woman in Memphis kept her seasoning mix in a coffee can on top of the refrigerator. She soaked the chicken in buttermilk overnight and dredged each piece through seasoned flour, measured by the shake of her wrist and nothing else. The skillet's oil had to be exactly the right temperature, and she tested it by dropping a pinch of flour into the grease. If it sizzled and floated, the oil was ready. No thermometer, no timer. She stood at that stove and turned each piece exactly once, and she knew it was done by the sound of the sizzle, not by any clock on the wall. If you have ever walked into a kitchen where fried chicken was cooling on the counter wrapped in foil, you know what Sunday smelled like. That smell was the whole sermon. Here is what made her timing right. Every pan was different. Every batch of oil was different. She compensated without thinking about it.
Red rice cooked with tomato paste and sausage scraps became the colorful, flavorful dish that combined starch and protein in one economical pot that fed crowds with minimal effort. Black mothers would brown whatever sausage pieces were available, then cook rice directly in tomato paste thinned with water, creating dish with vibrant color and savory depth. The tomato paste was economical, costing less than fresh tomatoes while providing concentrated flavor that transformed plain rice into something special. Onions, peppers, and celery added when affordable, but the core remained rice, tomato paste, and whatever meat scraps could be found. This one-pot meal required minimal cleanup, crucial consideration when cooking for 20 people in small kitchens with limited hot water. The rice absorbed all the flavors as it cooked, creating cohesive dish where every bite tasted complete. Red rice represented Gullah and Low Country traditions that many black families carried with them during the Great Migration. Peanut butter and banana sandwiches, warm or fried, were the quiet heroes of tight-budget nights when families needed something filling, sweet, and comforting. Bananas were mashed or sliced, spread across bread with a thick layer of peanut butter that stuck to the roof of your mouth in the best possible way. Sometimes the sandwich was served cold, simple, and soft. Other nights it was placed in a skillet with a bit of butter and fried until the bread turned golden and the filling melted into a warm, gooey mixture that tasted almost like dessert. The smell of toasted bread and sweet banana drifted through the house, reminding everyone that a good meal did not have to be complicated. Kids devoured these sandwiches without realizing they were eating one of the most budget-friendly dinners imaginable. Adults appreciated how quickly they came together on nights when energy was low and money was stretched thin. Even now, people crave that comforting blend of nutty, creamy sweetness because it tastes like childhood kindness, like the soft end of a long day, like something made with care during tougher times. It was simple, warm, and unforgettable.
Number 24, candied yams. In the Black Sunday dinner tradition, candied yams were not a side dish. They were a declaration. A woman in Birmingham, Alabama, peeled sweet potatoes with a paring knife so old the handle had been wrapped in electrical tape twice. She sliced them thick, layered them in a baking dish with butter, brown sugar, and a pour of vanilla she eyeballed from the bottle. No measuring spoons, no recipe, just decades of knowing how much sweet was enough. The yams went into the oven before church and came out when the sermon was over, bubbling in a syrup so thick you could hold a spoon upright in it. Some women added orange juice, others added nutmeg. The variations were as individual as the women who made them, and every version was correct because there was no written original to argue against. And by the early 2000s, most families had switched to canned yams from a grocery store. The slow-peeled, hand-sugared version faded out of your reach.
Pound cake baked with margarine instead of butter became the golden, dense dessert that could be sliced thin to feed many people from a single loaf. Black mothers would cream margarine with sugar and eggs, adding flour gradually to create batter that baked into cake with tight crumb and rich flavor despite lacking expensive butter. The cake lasted for days when wrapped properly, actually improving in texture as it sat. A single pound cake could yield 24 thin slices when cut carefully, making it remarkably economical for providing dessert for large gatherings. Some women glazed their cakes with simple sugar icing, while others served them plain or with berries when fruit was affordable. Children loved pound cake because it was sweet without being overwhelming, while adults appreciated its versatility. Pound cake proved that basic ingredients could create impressive results. Breaded veal patties were once a diner favorite that found steady homes in 1960s kitchens, served with gravy and mashed potatoes like something straight off a lunch counter menu. Families bought them because they were inexpensive, easy to cook, and tasted tender once fried and covered in gravy. The breading gave them a crisp exterior, while the inside stayed soft and mild, making them a hit with children who had not yet learned to love stronger flavors. The dish felt comforting, reliable, and just hearty enough to end a long day right. Even though they appear less often today, many people still crave that nostalgic taste because it reminds them of childhood dinners served hot on plates that clattered slightly when set on the table. There was something reassuring about the whole routine, from hearing the sizzle of the patties in the pan to watching the gravy bubble as it thickened. It was a kind of dinner that did not require fuss or stress, only a warm pan, a steady hand, and the quiet instinct of someone who cooked from memory instead of recipes. Those veal patties were proof that simple food could feel like a feast when shared at a table filled with familiar voices and everyday conversation. Buttermilk biscuits served with sorghum syrup became the dessert alternative when pies and cakes felt too expensive, turning breakfast bread into sweet treat that satisfied cravings. Black mothers would make extra biscuits specifically for serving with syrup after dinner, knowing that warm bread with sweet topping could substitute for fancy desserts. Sorghum syrup was cheaper than honey or maple syrup, providing dark, complex sweetness that paired beautifully with buttery biscuits. Children loved this simple dessert because they could eat with their hands, breaking open hot biscuits and drizzling syrup into every layer. Adults appreciated how leftover biscuits from dinner could be repurposed into dessert without additional cooking. This wasn't elegant or sophisticated, but it provided that sense of completion that dessert offered. Biscuits with syrup proved that satisfaction came from simplicity rather than complexity.
Number 22, baked macaroni and cheese. This wasn't the kind from a blue box. This was a Sunday production. A woman in Atlanta mixed elbow macaroni with 3 or 4 kinds of cheese, eggs, evaporated milk, butter, and a seasoning blend she kept in an unmarked jar. She poured it into a casserole dish and baked it until the top turned golden and the edges got crispy enough to snap. The middle stayed creamy and soft. The secret, she said, was in knowing when to pull it from the oven, not by a timer, but by the color of the crust. According to food historians, James Hemings, an enslaved chef who trained in France, brought macaroni and cheese to American tables in the 1700s, and 200 years later, Black women had perfected it into something that had everything to do with a kitchen full of family waiting for Sunday dinner. The recipe was never written down because it changed every time. A little more cheese one week, a little less milk the next. If you asked her how much of each, she couldn't tell you. She adjusted by feel, and it was never wrong.
Baked chicken legs with paprika were the kind of simple oven meal every family seemed to know by heart. The chicken legs were seasoned with salt, pepper, and a heavy dusting of paprika that turned the skin a deep red as it baked. They cooked low and slow, filling the house with that unmistakable smell of roasted chicken that drifted through every room. The skin crisped just enough, the meat stayed juicy, and the seasoning tasted familiar and warm. Families served it with mashed potatoes, rice, or whatever vegetable was around that week, but the chicken always stole the show. It was inexpensive, reliable, and delicious, the kind of dish that never tried too hard but always delivered. Kids grabbed it with both hands, adults savored the flavor, and everybody ended up licking their fingers. Even now, people crave that paprika-dusted chicken because it tasted like family, like evening routines, like the kind of homemade meal that anchors a childhood. Deviled eggs made with extra mayonnaise and pickle juice stretched expensive eggs into appetizers that fed crowds while adding protein to meals that sometimes lacked adequate meat. Black mothers would hard-boil dozens of eggs when they went on sale, carefully peeling them and mixing the yolks with mayonnaise, mustard, pickle juice, and paprika until smooth and tangy. The pickle juice was key, adding flavor dimension while helping the filling stay moist and spreadable without requiring extra mayonnaise. Each egg half became a small, protein-rich bite that satisfied hunger while looking festive and deliberate on serving platters. Children loved deviled eggs because they were handheld and mild, while adults appreciated their versatility as appetizer, side dish, or even light main course when other food ran short. A dozen eggs could be transformed into 24 servings, making them remarkably economical for their protein content. The eggs could be prepared the day before Thanksgiving.
Number 23, collard greens. If you walked into a Black kitchen on a Sunday morning and did not smell greens simmering with the smoked ham hock, something was wrong. Collard greens were the backbone of the Sunday table, and the recipe existed only in the hands of the woman stirring the pot. She started with the ham hock, dropped into a deep pot of water. She added vinegar, whichever bottle she grabbed first. She tore the collard leaves off the stems by hand, washed them 3 times in cold water, and packed them into the pot so tightly the lid barely closed. Then she cooked them low and slow for 3 hours until the leaves turned silky and the potlikker at the bottom became the richest broth you ever tasted. The seasoning was salt, pepper, a little sugar to cut the bitterness, and whatever else her mother's hands had taught her. No 2 women made their greens the same way, and if you asked which version was best, you would start an argument that still has not been settled.
Macaroni and stewed tomatoes was a surprisingly tangy, humble dish that stretched every ingredient just a little further making it a popular staple in the 1960s kitchen. Elbow macaroni boiled until tender was mixed with tomatoes stewed down until they turned soft and slightly sweet, creating a flavor that was simple yet strangely satisfying. It did not pretend to be anything fancy. It was a dish for busy parents, hungry kids, and anyone needing comfort without cost. The tang from the tomatoes mixed with the soft macaroni in a way that stuck in your memory long after childhood passed. Some families topped it with a bit of cheese, some kept it plain, but either way, it tasted warm and familiar, like a weeknight that ended well. It was a dish defined not by extravagance but by reliability, something people still crave because it feels like stepping back into a kitchen where everything was steady and safe.
In 1965, the average Black holiday table held 28 homemade dishes, each carrying the name of a grandmother and a county and a Sunday. Back then, the work was the holiday. By 2025, the average table holds maybe 9, and 4 came from the deli counter. We did not lose these dishes because anyone stopped loving them. We lost them because women went to work, the wood stove was replaced, the cane mills closed, and the country ham went to a factory. The flavor that vanished was not just sage gravy or coconut frosting. It was the slow rhythm of 2 days in the kitchen, generation after generation, and a holiday honored by the work itself.